Matt Spaiser, welcome to the Button Up Podcast.
Hey, John. Hey, Brock. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here in the Gotham studio in New York in person and get to see your James Bond styled outfit today.
Yeah, I try to dress like, James Bond in my own way, especially whenever I have to do anything James Bond related.
All right. So we have the Suits of James Bond is the blog, and that's the original place that I remember finding you when I worked my desk job a very long time ago. And it's been great to see you just keep it up. You have delved into James Bond style in a way that I don't know that anybody else has ever thought this deeply about it.
Yeah, well, I've been at this for 10 years, almost 10 years with the blog. Now I have the I'm on the From Tailors with Love podcast that I co-host with Pete Brooker, and that keeps me busy as well with this stuff.
Yeah. Well, we want to get into that and how it started and everything, but how early do you remember some of your formidable James Bond memories as it relates to, the style of the character?
The style, yeah. My earliest memories of James Bond itself were probably watching Moonraker on television when I was a very, very young kid, maybe 3 years old, I don't know. But I probably started getting interested in the style maybe when I was about 11. It's hard to quite remember when I first got started, but I used to like to sketch pictures of James Bond, and just the clothing was very important, getting the clothing right, and I used to notice the differences between just different dinner jackets and just different suits, and I think I just kind of wanted to know more about that.
Because your formidable Bond is Roger Moore, right?
Yeah, Roger Moore is my Bond.
Yeah, your formidable Bond. Because Connery would have been around, but it seems like he's the one that you most identify with.
Yeah, I was probably taught to like Sean Connery the best when I was a kid. And then my friends were all into Pierce Brosnan. But after just watching more and more Roger Moore, he was my favorite.
Mm-hmm. You can always tell, like Brock and I, Pierce is our Bond. And you can tell a lot about a person by who their Bond is. Well,
I am from the Pierce generation.
Yeah.
Although I do feel that a lot of people that are our age probably have converted to Craig.
Yes.
Agreed.
That is true.
I think a lot of people have left Pierce behind.
Not me. Pierce for life.
Yeah. I still think he looks like what I think James Bond looks like, and he's not quite so serious. So that, to me, that's James Bond, but
yeah, I think he definitely has the look. Both you guys, your hair is kind of like Pierce. You have that. Especially like Brock, I think you kind of have like the GoldenEye look going on with your hair, with the wave a bit, and
pretty Irish.
We're blushing. That was very nice.
Were you generally already into kind of style and menswear even at a young age, or was it Bond that got you into that?
I was into style and menswear on some level when I was a really very little kid. Something actually that John and I have bonded over. I was inspired by Mr. Rogers. I wanted to wear a cardigan and a tie, like Mr. Rogers, when I was a very, very young kid.
Yeah.
And then at some point I got more into the Bond style. I was still quite young, but I just whenever I dressed up, I would wear a blazer, as many kids that around me would wear, and I guess I would see Roger Moore as the Blazer Bond and want to wear the blazer like Roger Moore did.
And so is this something a passion that grew as you got into high school, or did it wax and wane, or how did that go?
No, it kind of always grew. I say, in high school for my senior prom, when I had to wear a dinner jacket, I looked to James Bond to see exactly how to do it. So I did some research. I looked to see what all the James Bonds were wearing, what all the different James Bonds wore. At the time, Pierce Brosnan was Bond. Well, he kind of had finished his Bond at that point. But I was, I wanted the peak lapel dinner jacket that he wore. I wanted it just to look like that. I didn't quite know all the details at that time. My eye wasn't quite as trained as it is now.
There was no great blog that had all the details for it. I think that's what is hard about. Like, I remember being really into the Titanic as a kid and going to the library, and I wanted every book on the Titanic. Like, I couldn't even imagine if I could Google Titanic today and find all those resources. Like, you were also in the age before you could just go onto a computer and find everything.
Yeah, I did get a really big Titanic book when I was a kid.
Okay, so that's also why we connect so well. I think about that a lot. Like, if my parents had fostered that a little more and, like, said go into some kind of, like, oceanography studies, like, I might be an oceanographer right now because I want to know every detail about the Titanic and why it sank and why it failed and what happened to it later on. Like, that's a surprise fact for the day that I love the Titanic. But there really weren't that many resources, I'm sure, back then to Google, and you had to rely on the books probably from Eon in order to find out what type of clothing he was wearing and the gadgets. Because I remember reading Bond books as a kid too.
Yeah, I had a book. I think it's called The Secret World of 007, maybe. I think it's one of those DK books. And that book had a spread on James Bond's clothes. And so I had a picture of Pierce Brosnan in his GoldenEye dinner suit, that 3-piece dinner suit, and then it had a picture of him in one of his suits from The World Is Not Enough. And I had like 3 of his World Is Not Enough ties, and a bunch of other things. And that was like really interesting to me. I like really just that whole spread. I would just like examine it and just learn everything I could. And at that time, I guess that was really what James Bond style meant to me, seeing Pierce Brosnan wear those Brioni suits.
Were there other film characters that you identify with their style, or has it always been Bond?
I mean, Bond's been the main one. I have looked into other characters, especially ones that the James Bond actors played. So, like, when I was a kid, I'd also watch Remington Steele and examine Pierce Brosnan's clothes there, because there's a lot of clothes on that show, and it inspired me in other ways as well. Like, I think because he always wears a pocket square in that show, always. Even there's one episode, and he's wearing his suit jacket is off. He has a shirt with a breast pocket. He has a pocket square in the shirt's breast pocket. That's a little overboard, but I really that inspired me just to really be into pocket squares.
What was it about the character, I guess, that made you want to emulate his style?
I think it's just that James Bond did so many things so well. I figured, well, he's dressing well. He must be doing. I mean, the way he dresses must be just one of the great things that James Bond does. One of the great many things that he does well. And there's ways that we look up to Bond. There are some ways that we shouldn't be looking up to Bond. But I think his clothing is one of the more harmless ways to look up to him.
Mm-hmm.
So then as a kid, did you have a computer around the house? Because I also try to find, like, there weren't that many people. I should say there were a lot of blogs back when you started the blog, but it was people who were on the internet and were very technically literate. Like, when did computers come into the factor for you?
Oh, I mean, whenever I had a computer, I had a computer long before I was into James Bond. I mean, not long before, but a few years before. And when I got the internet, then I'd look up all these James Bond things that I could find online. I think must have been the first. The first big James Bond style website must have been James Bond Lifestyle that Remmert von Braun is still running, but he's been doing that for a very long time. And that was around before mine, and it's a place that I definitely spent a lot of time looking at that site. I can't remember. I would say that site. It didn't really inspire me to create mine, because it was a great site, and I didn't want to outdo that site in any way, because I wanted to do something different. Because his site doesn't focus so much on style as it focuses on the actual products. And it was a great place where I learned about where a lot of at least the more contemporary James Bond clothing items came from. I mean, I had a book. There's an interesting book called Dress to Kill, which came out in, I think, 1996. And that book, That book, I think I started my site because that book didn't tell me what I wanted to learn from it. It's a big book that doesn't tell you all that much about James Bond's style. Mm-hmm. It focuses on some other things in film, and I feel like the style of what it talks about is not detailed at all. It's very general. And reading that book I learned a little, but not nearly as much as I wanted to.
Well, I'd say if anybody reads your site, they should know that your middle name is actually Detail, because like the level of intricacy that you go into in the suits is very impressive. And it's one of the things that I can remember reading the site and I was like, this guy knows more about clothing than I've ever forgotten about any topic in my entire life. And so it's interesting that you had seeked out the information, but you couldn't find it. And so then that's what inspired you to really get the blog going?
Yes, that's part of it. I guess I think first what I had to do was learn more about clothes in general, learn more about tailored clothes, learn more about what these clothes are so I can identify them. Because if I didn't know anything about clothes in the first place, I wouldn't be able to look at the film and understand what I was looking at.
It's also tough on a VHS because it's very blurry.
Yeah, that was tough. And the old DVDs, when they all first came out on DVD, the DVD was no better than a VHS.
Right.
At least with the DVD, I could put it in my computer and pause it very easily and go back and research things and just keep looking at the same thing over and over again. So that was something that the DVD helped with. And then when they all came out on Blu-ray in 2012, that really also changed things. I had already been doing the blog for 2 years, and there were some of the films on Blu-ray. So I was able to look at those and figure out a little more than I could from the DVDs that I had been looking at. I'd been looking at James Bond's clothes on DVD long before I had started my blog. I had compiled a whole lot of research by the time I had started my blog. I didn't just start it and then go from there and figure out what to do. I kind of had a plan already.
Right. Because that's one of the things I always note too is you have the best screenshots of some of the clothing that goes in there. But even then, sometimes you have screenshots and I'm like, I don't know how he identified this because that is one of the things I feel like is one of your great secrets is to know not just what type of fabric it is, but who made the fabric and where it's from and the tailors. Like you have such an encyclopedic knowledge that you're able to identify so many of the things.
Well, some of those things, especially like who made some of the fabrics, in the 90s, there were some articles where people did talk with Brioni and they found out where a lot of where Pierce Brosnan's suitings came from. Because even though they were made, suits were made by Brioni in Italy, they used a lot of different English cloth mills, cloth merchants, which was really, really nice that they still stuck with a lot of English things there.
What do you remember about when you first started the blog? Was there a certain article that ended up getting spread really far? Like what were some of the first things you focused on that you started to know you were onto something?
I don't know. I think it took a while because I was just writing out some of the things in articles things that I was interested in, things that I wanted to share, things that I thought were interesting about James Bond's clothing. And then, people started reading it. I knew some people that I was able to share it with when I first started it, and then they probably share it with others. I think the first big thing, I'm not even sure. I think it definitely got a lot of attention around the release of Skyfall because that was the first Bond film to be released during the time after I started my blog. And the New York Times took note of it, and a reporter there I can't actually even remember if the reporter asked me for a quote or if the reporter just pulled something from my blog, but so I had been very critical of the fit of the suits in Skyfall, which was something that we had never seen James Bond wear clothes that looked too tight on him before. So that was very shocking to me at the time, and it was something that I had commented on, and that this reporter in the New York Times took note of that.
Mm-hmm. And what did they say?
What did
they? I guess what quote did they pull from you, or did they have an opinion on your opinion?
I can't remember exactly what happened. The article was called 006 and a half. It was a very, very clever title, And I think the costume designer Gianni Tamim was quoted in the article, and then my response to the fit was quoted in there. And I don't think the article itself took an opinion on this. But just using my opinion.
It reported that the blogosphere was unhappy with James Bond's new suits. I remember that because I remember you had posted something about getting into the New York Times, which is like getting the New York Times is very exciting for. Yeah, but had you done content related to the Casino Royale releases then too?
Well, I had done content related to every Bond film by that point because I started in 2010, so I had 22 official Eon Bond films to work from, and I had also touched on, other films like Never Say Never Again. Probably, I had already gone into some other things that are somewhat related to Bond style, like Roger Moore and the Saint, and Pierce Brosnan and Remington Steele. So those are things that I've also touched on my blog.
And when you were publishing all this content, I know you had a plan, but was the goal to kind of document everything you knew, or was it to keep learning more? Or did you want to build a community around this, or like find other people that were into it?
Okay, definitely both of that. Yeah. I wanted to, just share everything that I know. And sometimes, if I don't know something and I don't mention it in an article, someone will be like, well, like you left this out, or they'll ask me like, well, what is this? And if I didn't write it down, I don't know. I don't know the answer. But then I have learned a lot from people that have, I have a lot of comments under each post, and I do welcome people to share what they know, what their opinions. I'm really interested to hear what other people have to say about this. And that's something that I've really enjoyed about my blog is having other people be able to comment, and I can learn from other people, because I've learned a lot.
Was that ever surprising that there were other people out there that were not only as into James Bond style, but also who knew more than you? Yeah,
well, I mean, I think there are some people that know more than me about a lot of things, and one reason why I started this site was also to hopefully that these people would share with me what they know, because I want to learn. And totally. There's a lot more about James Bond clothes that no one seems to know. Like, where did Roger Moore get some of his ties? We don't know that. And that's something. I know where he got some of his ties. He got some of them from his tailor, Doug Hayward, in the 80s. Don't know where his 70s ties came from. And that's like a mystery that me and maybe like two other people want to know.
But it's got to get on the blog at some point. Mm-hmm. Someday, it's like Indiana Jones. You'll crack it at some point.
Yeah.
If you don't, it might never be discovered.
Right. So then, as you're growing the blog and you're writing and you're diving into all the films, is that also informing your personal style and the way that you want to interpret the Bond style?
Oh yes, learning more about Bond style is. I think it's just unraveled a lot of mysteries for me. It's taught me a lot about clothes. I've learned a lot about clothes through Bond. Like before, I can't remember when it was that I learned about grenadine ties. Because that's what I'm wearing one right now. Mm-hmm. They're my favorite ties. That's what Sean Connery wears as Bond. Roger Moore had one in For Your Eyes Only. They're very fashionable right now. People love them. I think the internet helped them take off. But I was really into them before that, and Turnbull and Astor sold them. But before I ever went into a Turnbull and Astor, I couldn't find out what they were. No one else sold them. No one in no other store, probably in New York, was selling them. Maybe they were. I think a few. I think Brioni had them, but they were just this silk. This Italian silk is just something that I think a lot of Americans didn't know about. They were very popular in a lot of English brands at the time. Long before they became popular worldwide.
So even though James Bond was wearing them, that trend didn't necessarily, stick.
Yeah, I think a lot of things that James Bond wore were just too exclusive to become big trends, and especially in the 60s, when Americans could look at a James Bond suit and they'd see it through American eyes. They'd see it through what they knew. They didn't know about the side adjusters and the trousers. That was an English thing, and Americans would not have known what those were. So I think one example that it kind of explains that is in the movie Catch Me If You Can, when Leonardo DiCaprio was getting that copy of a Goldfinger suit. Have you guys seen that film? So he's getting a copy of a Goldfinger suit, and the suit is it's a light gray 3-piece suit, and that's where the similarities end. And I think that, at that time, Americans would not have been able to no one could have paused the film to examine the clothes. And I think that an American tailor, I think this film was very accurate in how they showed what an American interpretation in the mid 1960s could have been of a British suit, because they were just so different. Americans didn't put pleats on their trousers at the time. They were just they didn't put lapels on the waistcoat. There were just so many small things that make the James Bond style so special.
Mm. And do you think now, since we're in the internet age, now Bond's character and what he's wearing can influence trends in menswear a little bit? I
think it can. He always has to some extent, but now he can influence them to a greater level of detail than he ever did, because I think people can take better note of these details, and we have been seeing that. We've been seeing. You have lots of places that make replicas of film clothes, and they can make better replicas of James Bond clothes than they had before because of this. But it's also easier to get a hold of the actual clothes that James Bond wore, whether it's the brand that's selling them to the public, or you have exhibits. There was a great exhibit that I went to London for in 2012 called Designing 007, and there you could see a lot of the clothes. There have also been auctions where people can examine the actual James Bond clothes, and these things, just being able to get closer to what the clothes mean, what they are, has definitely changed things for the world of James Bond clothes.
You know that Amiga will always release a special edition along with the movie as it's coming out, so you can always pick up that too.
Yes, you can definitely pick that up, but which is not usually a replica of a James Bond watch. It happened so with Spectre, and because they released that film watch, but their special editions are usually something more like a Mickey Mouse watch.
Oh yeah,
they quite often are. Not always. Sometimes they make some very nice James Bond watches, but sometimes they just have a whole dial covered in 007s.
Yeah.
And what are you wearing?
I'm wearing an Omega Speedmaster. I got this in 2001. It's the triple date. So I wear this one a lot. This is like my everyday watch. I've been wearing it almost every day since 2001.
Nice.
And is that a brand affinity because at that point Pierce had been wearing the Omega watches?
It had a little to do with it. There were a lot of watches I was interested in at the time. I think it was. I thought Rolexes were great, Breitlings were great. There were a lot of great watches that I really liked at the time. I just happened to get this watch, I think, because I liked it. I think I just really liked the way it looked. I just thought all the different subdials and hands were just so cool. And because this, I think if I was really into getting it because of Bond, I would have gotten the Brosnan Seamaster.
Nobody could have known the Speedy would have become the internet darling that it is today.
Yeah.
True. So how do you feel about, you were critical of some of how tight the clothes were in Skyfall. And does that go for the formal and casual clothing?
More of the tailored formal clothes.
Okay.
When you have like a tight polo shirt, that's not, I think that's okay. Polo shirts stretch, their knits can stretch sweaters can stretch to kind of follow the curve of the body. Tailored clothing doesn't do that to the same extent. It can't do that as well. So that's, I think that Daniel Craig, I think that actually he probably looks his best in the casual clothes. because they really work to the strengths of his physique. Mm-hmm. The tailored clothing is not meant to show off a muscular physique, and it can tend to look, if it's well fitted, even when it is well fitted on someone who's muscular, it can look just boxy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely makes it harder to fit if you have athletic proportions.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Arnold Schwarzenegger has never really looked all that great in a suit.
Mm-hmm.
T-shirt though, dude looks great, and that's how Daniel Craig is. Like I think of Daniel Craig in a polo, and it's like that is a fit dude.
Yeah, or LeVar Brown trunks.
Yes. Oh yeah, well, I really like Daniel Craig in a polo more so than in a T-shirt. I think the collar of a polo shirt is definitely more flattering to most people, and it kind of gives him an elegance that a T-shirt doesn't give him, but it still shows off what he's worked so hard to achieve.
Yeah. Now you're wearing your Connery Cuffs. It looks like your cocktail cuffs.
Well, no, actually, this is a button down cocktail cuff. So this is something. Well, actually, Connery did wear this in Never Say Never Again. Roger Moore wore this mostly in the Persuaders, but also in the Saint. This shirt is made by Frank Foster, who was Roger Moore's shirt maker.
Well, I know what I asked too because I know you've been involved in helping to sketch some of you've sketched some more accurate designs for the cuffs, right? And you've worked with some of the companies in order to get that correct.
Yes, I have worked with a few different companies.
And that's just because you know what it's supposed to be? They don't necessarily know the details, and you're just trying to spread the knowledge you've accumulated.
Yes, that's pretty much it. I really just wanted to figure out what's primarily the Connery cuff, because that is not a cuff that Trimble & Nasser offers in their collection. They have their own type of cocktail cuff, which is a little different, which they developed at some point later on. But I think Trimble & Nasser of late has been trying to replicate the Connery cuff in their bespoke clothes, and I know some people that have gotten that more accurate cuff from them, but it's still never quite right. Whenever I see it, it never looks quite the same as it does on Connery. But then again, nothing does.
That might be more the attitude,
right?
Have you had many companies, either menswear companies or like costume designers or anybody involved with the Bond industry, reach out to you for help?
No one's reached out to me for help on the actual films, no. But people did use my blog for research for that Designing 007 exhibit back in 2012. I went into Trimble & Nasser around at that time in London. They had a whole mood board of pictures they printed out from my blog.
Wow. That's really cool.
I walked into the store, I introduced myself to a salesperson, and he took me down to the basement and showed me what they were doing with my work.
That must have been quite a moment.
Yeah, and then I went to the exhibit like the next day, and I still noticed they got some things wrong.
Jeez, they got to get you involved earlier.
Yeah,
they do.
Now, have you worked with them since that exhibit?
I have not worked with them. They are aware of what I do, but I generally do not. I haven't worked with them. I've different companies that have done work on, have worked on some of the clothes. They have occasionally reached out to me. Mostly my friend David Zaritsky, who you've recently spoke with. He gets most of the attention. He does great work. He does incredible work.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. You and David and a few other guys, there's kind of a niche community now that seems to have grown probably since you started, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, this goes back, to the Bond lifestyle with that Remmert started. David Zaritsky was working on that, and then he branched off into the Bond experience. I think he started the Bond experience after I started my blog. I think. I can't remember when he started that. He's been doing that for a while now.
Well, what he told us is he went straight to YouTube because he didn't like to write, which I very much aligned with.
Yeah, and I'm definitely more of a writer. I mean, it took me quite a while to just become comfortable doing a podcast. Because Pete, who I do the podcast with, he was doing a different podcast. this was back in 2016, and he reached out to me because he wanted to interview me for the Menswear Style podcast that he was working on, and I was really hesitant to do it, and he coaxed me into it. And I think that was the first podcast I had ever done. So I was really nervous to do it, but Pete was really encouraging, and he still is a very encouraging person. He's a really great person to work with.
Menswear Style podcast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I listen to that one all the time.
Well, you got a great voice for podcasting.
Oh, thanks.
Sounds like NPR in here.
Yeah, my high school orchestra teacher told me that I had a great speaking voice when we had to do we had to record our practicing and introduce the pieces that we were practicing. And she was the first person to tell me that I had a great speaking voice.
Well, she knew what she's talking about.
It does sound like NPR.
But she said that because my playing wasn't so good.
Backhanded compliment.
Play to your strengths.
Yeah. It's like a face for radio. So then what would you say then are like the top 3 brands that are associated with the Bond franchise outside of Omega that we already talked about?
Right now?
Just historically. Because it seems like there are some brands that run through most of the series.
Yeah, I would say Turnbull & Asser is one of the biggest. They've made a big name for themselves with Bond. And for a while, they didn't really seem to care about it. Now they do. Because now I think they understand the power it can bring. And they want to use that power. So that's one of them, even though they haven't done anything on the film since Casino Royale in 2006. But I think right now, the brands, I think the brands are more important now than they had ever been before. They get a lot more attention now. So Tom Ford, which has been with Bond since 2008 and Quantum of Solace, shortly after Tom Ford founded his own brand. And that is, Tom Ford didn't even do much about Bond until Spectre. They didn't release Bond lines. They made it quite difficult to get the actual Bond clothes. But now it's a much easier. I've heard that they are going to be releasing a Bond line to coincide with No Time to Die. So then I think that that's also been a really big Bond brand. Now we have brands like Olabar Brown and Peel that have released 007 lines. They don't have quite the history with Bond, but they've really embraced it. And I think to the community that means a lot. Yeah.
It seems like Anthony Sinclair is also – they're one of the original brands, right? That was Sean Connery's.
Sean Connery's tailor Anthony Sinclair. Yeah. Tailored Sean Connery for 6 films. George Lazenby bought a suit that Sean Connery didn't pick up.
Oh yeah, that was in his Hulu documentary.
Yeah, he went to Anthony Sinclair, and there was a suit that Connery didn't pick up, and Lazenby bought it from Sinclair, and which is quite an incredible story, and that's a great way that it ties in the brand. So yeah, now Mason and Sons has that. They've been running. They've been tailoring suits with the Anthony Sinclair name for close to a decade now.
Yeah, I remember seeing that one on David Swirsky's YouTube channel. He got the Masons and Sons Anthony Sinclair suit.
Yeah, I have a lot of clothes from them. They've done a lot they've sold clothes from other Bond brands as well. Like a number of years ago now, they brought out the Slazenger jumper from Goldfinger, which is great. I mean, I wear that. I wore it to work last week, and one of my coworkers was like, "Man, that's a nice sweater." And
like it's good enough for Bond. Yeah.
Yeah. And for some reason, that one he notices. He doesn't notice any of my other sweaters, but that one he does. And it is great to wear that. But yeah, a lot of the Anthony Sinclair. So now Mason and Sons only uses the Anthony Sinclair name for their suits made in England. And I have one of their bespoke dinner suits that I wore to my wedding, and it's beautiful.
Now, for the footwear too, it seems like Alden is used quite a bit.
No, so
Crockett and Jones.
Crockett and Jones. Crockett and Jones. I'm wearing their boots right now, and Crockett and Jones has been with Bond since Skyfall. I was wearing Crockett and Jones for a number of years before that because they're just such a wonderful British shoe brand. I feel like they're not too expensive. I mean, they're definitely expensive, but because the quality is really great. But they're not like John Lobb. They're not so far out of reach, and I think that they are one of the more accessible brands. And I do prefer them over Churches, which Bond had been wearing on and off since GoldenEye. The Churches don't fit me so well. They're too wide for my feet.
I can remember Crockett and Jones because I wanted the chukkas that Daniel Craig wore in Skyfall, and I remember finding it on James Bond Lifestyle, and that was the first time that I was like, wow, there are shoes that are more expensive than $300 in this world. And I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah, but they are a better value if you can buy them if you're in England. Over here, that goes for most British clothing. When they bring them here, there's just all plus the exchange rate plus the import duties, and it just makes them a bit more out of reach for Americans. So I've bought some of my Crockett and Jones over in England. I've bought them here on sale.
Just wear them right home. Shout out to Harris. I know Harris has quite a closet of Crockett and Jones.
Yeah, Harris has a great wardrobe.
Yeah.
Was there like a golden era of Bond style in your opinion, or any like single maybe outfits that really stand out?
I think Goldfinger is probably the gold standard of Bond clothes because it introduces the white dinner jacket. It has that the hacking jacket that Mason and Sons has been making now for a little while. I have one of those, and it has the famous 3-piece Glen check suit. That was one of those suits that no one seemed to notice it was a Glen check until I pointed it out. A lot of people call it a sharkskin suit. One of your former guests mentioned that.
Yeah, you need to have that 4K Blu-ray restoration to really see it.
Yeah, I think I can't remember if I needed the Blu-ray for it to notice that check. I think I noticed it on the DVD. There's a close-up of his pocket. But yeah, I think that film just those outfits I think make Goldfinger one of the most stylish Bond films, and I think one of the most important for style. I mean, Dr. No did a lot of stuff just to establish Bond style, and all of his suits, his dinner suit, they're all beautiful in that film. Thunderball got some great things, and I really love what George Lazenby wore. Not quite everything, but a lot of it.
What's wrong with kilts? James Bond in a kilt.
Yeah, I'm not Scottish, so I don't think I could have a say in that one.
Yeah, true.
Is there a direction do you want to see it move back in that direction, or how do you think, in a perfect world, in your perfect world, how would Bond style move forward in today's society?
Yeah, I think it should. I would like to see the tailored clothes go more back to the English tailors. Didn't think that was possible until Kingsman. Kingsman has shown that you can have action heroes wearing, English bespoke suits.
So you're a fan of the way that Kingsman has portrayed English style?
I think they've done a lot to really draw attention to English tailoring in a way that Bond has not done in a long time. And I think at the time that Bond was doing it, it was so out of reach for most of the world because you had to go to England. I think there were some tailors that traveled probably to New York and Washington, D.C., but not too many other places. So if you probably didn't even know what that was. I mean, when Sean Connery mentioned Savile Row and Dr. No, I wonder how many people actually knew what Savile Row was. I don't imagine many Americans did.
Do you think this suit is dead?
Oh, no.
No.
One thing I think that I liked about about the suits that we've seen so far for No Time to Die is that he's wearing this. Daniel Craig is wearing this lightweight corduroy suit, and I think that suit is what it's done is. That suit is because it's a more relaxed suit. It's not your stiff Savile Row suit. It's a suit I think for the modern man. It's a suit for someone who doesn't need to wear a suit. It's something that you can wear this suit. You can wear the trousers and the jacket separately. You can wear them together. You can wear them. I mean, Daniel Craig is wearing it with a tie. You don't need a tie for that suit. It'll look great without one. I think there's a lot you can do with that kind of dressed down suit. Something that you can put on for the weekend, and just wear it if you have enough confidence.
So the suit's not dead.
No,
it's good. Some people, one of our former guests would argue the suit is dying a slow, painful death, but I think when you wear it right, like the corduroy, I have a corduroy blazer that I really love to wear, like in the fall. Like that's one of my go-to pieces. I like that.
Yeah, I think corduroy can be great. You can really do a lot with it, and you don't have to worry about looking like you're so dressed up.
Mm. Yeah, I think that for most guys, the suit is something you're still going to need because you're going to wear it to your wedding and funerals and maybe job interviews. But I like the more casual nature of modern suits with, soft shoulders and just kind of easier to wear. Not that that's appropriate for every occasion, but that's kind of the suit that I gravitate toward.
Yeah, I still like those more structured suits. But the nice thing about a lot of the English bespoke suits, like especially the ones that Sean Connery and Roger Moore wore, those suits actually have quite soft shoulders. Like my Anthony Sinclair bespoke suit has just about no shoulder padding. Although it does feel a bit stiff, but it actually is. It's actually very light. So I can wear that, and I feel very comfortable. I don't feel like I'm wearing a suit of armor like you might get from some of the military tailors in Savile Row. But Bond often wore more modern English tailored suits that were lightweight. Now, Sean Connery, because he was so muscular, his suits looked kind of built up, even though they weren't, because there was just so much of him underneath them.
Yeah, makes sense.
One of the things that came out of your interview with David Zaritsky is that you don't go out in public in a T-shirt.
Yeah, no.
That seems to be a very strong conviction you have. Is there any deeper reason to that?
Yeah, I haven't done that since I was about 10 years old.
It's just not enough coverage, not enough formality. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I do think that just about all men look better when they have some kind of collar on their neck. It's also why I'm a fan of higher shirt collars and not some of the lower, like tiny shirt collars that are trendy today. Mm-hmm. That's why I kind of like Roger Moore's Frank Foster shirts with their really high collars, and that's one thing that's really inspired me. So I think they give a man a more powerful look.
It's true. It's the suit's made for. It's got that V. It's got all the shapes for making guys look as powerful as they can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we do a series of rapid-fire questions that you haven't prepared for, but if you're up for it, we'd like to run through just like 1 or 2 word answers.
Well, I have listened to your podcast before.
Yeah, so. But we changed them up because we knew. No, I'm just kidding.
I was like, oh, we did?
Yeah, you'll be familiar with some of these. Oxfords or brogues?
So this is one that how do you answer this? Because you can have brogue Oxfords.
Yeah. That's true.
I do like, but generally I do actually like, I like Oxfords that aren't brogued, but I do like both.
I don't think I've ever seen you wear a pair of brogues.
I have a pair of these slip-on full brogues from Crockett & Jones. Mm-hmm. They're really special.
How about plain toe or cap toe?
I think I prefer plain toe.
Plain toe? Nice. All right.
See, we change them up.
Yeah. This is probably an easy one, but loafers or sneakers?
Loafers.
Yeah.
Do you own sneakers?
Well, of course. I mean, every one man at least needs those, but I do.
How am I supposed to know? You don't wear T-shirts.
It's true, just for working out and whatnot.
Yeah.
All right, for style, spring, summer, or fall, winter?
I'm going to have to go with spring, summer.
Spring, summer, okay. Morning shower or evening shower?
Morning.
Morning shower. Jeans, chinos, or trousers?
Trousers.
Least favorite James Bond?
Daniel Craig.
Ooh, fighting words.
Controversial.
Fighting words with David Zaritsky.
Notch lapels or peak lapels?
Notch.
Navy or charcoal?
Navy.
Navy, okay. Lifting or cardio?
Cardio.
Works at the gym too, so take that one seriously. And then if you're listening to a song in the morning, just trying to get pumped up for a big day, what song is it?
Yeah, this was one I did put some thought into, so I figured you'd ask that. And, I think I like to listen to the James Bond soundtracks to get pumped up. I listen to a lot of music, a lot of classical music, jazz, but I actually like the James Bond soundtracks. There's one track in particular from that John Barry wrote for the Living Daylights called Hercules Takes Off. It's got a drum machine, so it really has that pumping rhythm to it, but it has these big orchestra hits that I've always loved that one.
I do love the more era of film scores, like the soundtracks. Yeah, there's something because they get really funky. That whole era,
yeah,
because of the 70s.
I was debating whether to say that track or from 1981's For Your Eyes Only. One of my favorites by Bill Conti is "Runaway," which is very funky. Kind of, I like it better than Bond 77, which is kind of like the go-to funky Bond track. Mm-hmm. But "Runaway" by Bill Conti is one of my favorites. It kind of has a little bit of the disco vibe going with some of the strings. That's also one of my favorite tracks for getting pumped up. I listened to both these tracks on my way here, just so you guys know.
Oh, wow. All right. Well,
you came in hot.
Because I want to get pumped up for this podcast.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to put those on the playlist.
Yeah, I know. Well, so that's what I've learned too about you is you also have a very deep affinity and knowledge of opera and classical music. And does that tie into Bond at all, or is that just something you see as?
I'm not sure how much Bond had to do with that. I mean, I guess when I go to the opera, I can feel like Timothy Dalton in The Living Daylights. But I've always, I guess I just wanted to learn more about music as much as I can, and I've gotten into classical music and opera a lot, probably mostly in the past decade, maybe a little more. But I think John Barry did like the opera because occasionally when I'll go see a new opera I'd never heard before, and I'll hear something that John Barry took and put into a Bond score. And that really, gets me so excited. There was an opera I went to, I think it was last season, called Adriano Lecouvreur from the early 1900s. And there's this passage in there, it keeps going on. And I'm like, this sounds really familiar. And I was like, this is from Moonraker.
Wow. Yeah. I didn't realize I was listening. I think it was a James Bond radio episode where they dove into the films, and I think they were doing. I'm going to mix it up now, but it was showing how much John Williams had taken from late 1800s classical music and put that into either Star Wars or Indiana Jones. And I was like, there's an entire world of music that I feel like I'll never actually get into unless it's explained to me in that way.
Oh, yeah. John Williams took a lot. He took, probably music ranging from late 1800s through the mid 1900s. A lot of Star Wars, some of it comes from, there's Holst the Planets, and Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring. Those are two pieces that are from the early 1910s. Can't remember exactly the year, maybe 1913, I think, for The Rite of Spring. Now, these pieces, there are some things directly lifted from The Rite of Spring that appear in Star Wars that I think George Lucas used these as temp tracks, and I think he liked them so much, which happens sometimes in film that you ask the composer to write something very similar to it or just take this. So that happened. John Williams has done that for quite a few things. There's great piece. Probably one of the most famous things he wrote for E.T. was some of that from the flying music towards the end, which he took directly from Howard Hanson's Second Symphony, which was written in the mid 20th century. And that's probably one that not as many people know of, but I think John Williams actually has helped me learn about some of this classical music.
Yeah,
because I knew it first from John Williams, as I think a lot of people from the John Williams generation, people that grew up on 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s films, probably heard it first through John Williams before they found out what this classical music was, if they ever found out what the classical music was.
I'm getting chills just thinking about that E.T. score right now. I feel like I gotta go back and watch it. So we're ramping up for Bond 25, and some stuff has already come out about the film and the style. What are you most excited for as we come up to the new movie?
think I'm most excited just to see if there's any more clothes we haven't seen yet.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah, we have seen a lot. There's been a lot of photos.
I don't watch trailers as a policy.
You don't watch trailers, okay? Because we did see a lot in the trailers, but I think even before the trailer came out, there were a lot of paparazzi photos or even official photos that showed off a lot of the outfits.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then, besides Bond 25, what are you most excited about in the next year?
Next year, probably more trips that I might go on. I want to go visit more Bond locations. That's one thing my wife and I have bonded over, being able to go to Bond locations, because I mean, when I've shown her James Bond films, I think she likes them most for just to see all these exotic locations. She's been to some, I haven't been to some of them, and I think that's kind of like a way that we can like both get into Bond is visiting these locations. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's entryways for everybody. That was your honeymoon, right? You were in Rome and
in Venice.
Venice, yeah.
Venice.
I was going to say Casino Royale, because I remember you took a picture of the house that came down.
Well, where the house was.
Oh, yeah.
Well, where it never was, but where it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I actually love Venice more for Moonraker.
Mm-hmm.
And what's top on the travel list right now?
Well, we were just discussing it earlier today, and we might be going to Vienna, where Bond goes in Living Daylights. That's Living Daylights is one of my favorites. A lot of it is for the classical music and all those places that Bond goes to in Vienna. So probably won't go to the Afghanistan that he goes to, which I think they filmed in Morocco. But I can go to Morocco someday.
Yeah, I want to take that train that he takes in Spectre.
Oh, yeah. It's a nice train.
I know.
I've never been on a train that nice.
Me neither. I just got off the Amtrak, so I'm definitely not even close to that bar.
Baby steps.
Baby steps, yeah. Well, Matt Spaiser, thank you for coming on the Button Up Podcast. Everybody has to make sure they check out Suits James Bond. You're doing a lot more on Instagram, it seems like, too.
Yeah, you can find me at Bond Suits.
Bond Suits on Instagram, and it's bondsuits.com, right?
Bondsuits.com is my website. That's
great. And we'll catch up with all the stuff you got planned coming up for Bond 25 as you deep dive into Daniel Craig stuff. And thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.